Great to have you along. Welcome to your weekend. So I had an opportunity to interview Annie Ellis on the Big Biz Show. As you know, Rusty Nails and myself have a national TV show in about 110 million homes every day and about 150 radio stations. And I've seen Annie on KUSI quite a bit talking about just employment law and so on and so forth. I thought we should make her sort of a regular here on San Diego Business Weekend because, well, we don't have an unemployment attorney. We've never actually talked to one. So welcome to the program, Annie. Great to have you along. How are you? So listen, I want to ask you for our Southern California audience, since we broadcast from here all the way up to Santa Barbara and as far east as Yuma. Is California, should California have a moat around it with respect to our employment laws, or our unemployment laws, our onerous employment laws as bad as anybody else in the country, in your opinion?
I actually think that the state may just fall off and float into the Pacific, given how heavy all of the laws are.
So we're on the same page there. Is it really? So it's worse then? It's worse than anywhere else, or is it? Are there other states as bad as we are?
This is by far the worst, and by the way, this is my assistant here. Apologies. And I've got many clients who actually pull out of doing business here. It's really sad for our economy and our state. But now what I worry about is post-COVID, everything is going to be remote, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to lend itself to, okay, great, I'm a California-based business,
right,
but I can go hire people in Nevada. It's going to cost me a lot less, and I don't have to deal with the crazy laws, and that's going to be a loss to our economy that we really can't afford.
Well, and what's interesting, if you think in terms of that, as an employee, you'd think that would be on your side, but at the end of the day, it's not on your side. And there's a couple of reasons. Let me be analogous by using minimum wage for an example. Minimum wage is a terrific intention, but a horrible idea. And again, as an employee, you'd think minimum wage would help you as an employment law. And in reality, there's only three outcomes when you have a private business, the Joe Six-Pack's Deli on the corner, who, by the way, is probably at a 5 or 6% profit margin if he is smoking. In reality, it's probably a 3% profit margin. Back in the 70s, average profit margins were 12%. But if you, by the stroke of a pen as a legislator, increase your top OPEX line, operating expense line, by, let's say, 15%, well, the math doesn't work if you only have 5% profit. So one of three things is going to happen there as well. You're going to have to shut your business, you're going to have to fire some people to afford to be in business, or you're going to raise your prices. Now, what does that do? If you're an employee that gets suddenly paid more money, but everything's more expensive, that's like cutting off the top of the blanket and sewing it on the bottom of the blanket. So, I think there needs to be protections for employees, and there needs to be protections for employers. But it's the messaging that's the problem, don't you think? Because,
yeah,
right?
So I don't know if you recall, but a couple years ago in San Diego, we passed a higher minimum wage and sick leave ordinance. And what that did is it raised our local minimum wage higher than the state, and it also passed a higher sick leave requirement, 40 hours a year instead of 24 hours a year. What the impact of that was is it hit the restaurant industry really hard. So if you go around town in San Diego or LA, which has the same ordinance, or San Francisco, which has the same one, look at your receipt, because they are passing the cost off to the consumer. You're going to see what's called a surcharge. It's anywhere from 2 to 4%, and what they call it is the minimum wage and paid sick leave surcharge, because they can't afford to pay for it because of those margins.
Well, and I think that's the one thing that I mean, look, I think there needs to be maybe two rules. If you have the Walmarts of the world, and they're publicly traded companies, you can see their 10Ks and their 10Qs every quarter and every year. You can see exactly how much profit they have, and look at, although it's not for us to determine how a publicly traded company uses their money, many of us are invested in those, and look at the CEO serves at the pleasure of the board of directors, who serves at the pleasure of the shareholders. And if the shareholders say, look, you need to be paying your low-level employees more money, that's one thing. But to tell a private attorney, let's say, who has a staff at the law offices of Annie Ellis, that you now have to pay your lowest wage assistant $20 an hour now, when your office manager was getting $20 an hour, what happens to the office manager? So do you now raise her wages as well? That's the thing, that's the law of unintended consequences here, don't you agree?
Yeah, and a lot of people are surprised that not just the minimum wage for hourly workers in California is so high, but the minimum threshold for a salaried employee in California is $54,000 a year. I get a lot of out-of-state employers that are blown away by that because the federal requirement is about half of that.
Yeah.
And it goes up. It's statutorily required to go up on a year-by-year basis, and it's just really tough in order to maintain those types of labor charges.
Hey, Annie, by the way, just because she's new to the program, I'm going to say this again. Annie Ellis is an employment lawyer here in San Diego. Law offices of Annie M. Ellis. You can go to annieellislaw.com. If you want to find more about her. Let's talk about unemployment. Unemployment ends today. It's Saturday. And unemployment, the expanded unemployment, ends now. What's next? What can workers do? Because there's a lot of folks that listen to the program that are unfortunately not employed. Is there an expanded package? We talked to Christina Gustin earlier today about the potentiality of another $1,200 worth of stimulus. Tom Del Caro mentioned it probably be the end of August. What do those poor folks do now for the next 3-4 weeks? And are you hearing any word on the street about that expanded unemployment?
Well, the last that I read, which was this morning, was that the congressional Republicans seemingly did not come to some sort of resolution, but their last proposal was either reduce the $600 to $200 a week, which is up from the $100 proposal that they were offering the day before, or make the $600 tiered based on income.
Okay, wait. Hold on a second. So let's back that up, because I think that's important, because the compromise was we're going to pay you to go back to work, basically, right? Wasn't that the impetus of this thing? We're going to pay you to go back to work?
A bonus, right, to return to work, to incentivize them.
And the incentivizing thing is that if we pay them to go back to work, how do we know the jobs are even going to be there? That's the other part of the equation, correct?
Well, and I think in order to qualify for that, you need to have a firm offer letter in hand from your employer. And I'll tell you, if I had $1 for every time I dealt with this situation in the last few months, I wouldn't have to work anymore, where we send an offer letter to an employee who is on furlough or has been laid off, and we say, we've got a job for you. Please come back to work. And you know what the response is? I'm making more on unemployment.
Well, but isn't that, didn't Congress come out, or didn't the EDD come out with something that said that if you were offered work and you denied it, not only do you have to give up employment benefits, but you may have to pay part of it back? Was that a rumor? I know I read something, and I know I actually reported on News Radio 600 KOGO on the morning news here, but where does that stand? Or was that just something that was in the wind?
Yeah, that's actually always been the case. That's always been the EDD rules and regulations. But what they did is they added a wrinkle, and they said, why are you refusing this? Are you refusing the job because you feel your workplace is unsafe and your employer isn't complying with COVID requirements? If that's the case, then you have the right to turn down the job offer and still get benefits. Or, this is a new one, if you can't take your job offer because of child care issues, which I think a lot of families are facing right now, they're saying that's a valid reason and you can continue to stay on unemployment.
Yeah, and that's where the system might be broken, and that's probably the law of unintended consequences. Do you see any major changes in employment law, either on the side of the worker or the side of the employer, coming down the pipe for the rest of this year that that you thought were definitely coming, but now maybe because of COVID they're not? Is there any? Your landscape's changed significantly. Obviously, you're busier than you were before this thing.
I am busier, and I think employment law is never going to be the same again. I think the one issue right now that a lot of people are watching is the liability waiver, whether or not Congress is going to pass something that says employers aren't liable for certain COVID-type issues in the workplace. So if that does happen, I would be curious to see what California's response is, because they often don't like these sort of business-friendly federal government laws that are passed, and they may have a knee-jerk reaction and pass something that overrides that. So that's the one issue that I think is on the forefront of many business minds right now and that I'm watching pretty closely. Yeah,
I think the piece of that there is because obviously on the employee side, you don't know where your employer's been the night before. It's about personal responsibility. For the employer side, you can tell everyone that they need to maintain social distance. They need to, wash their hands often. They need to, if guests are in, you got to wear a face mask and stuff. But look, you don't know where people have been. I don't know how the onus could be on the employee or the employer in this. I think that's an impossible one, isn't it?
It is, and not every business translates to this working remotely environment where we can safely put our employees in a home office, and that, of course, raises its own issues. But many businesses need their employees actually at the work site. Retail, hotel, janitor, restaurant, all of these business construction, they can't be done remotely. So we've got to get a way for employers to not be scared to bring employees back to work and feel that they're going to be opened up to litigation, because in California, litigation can crush you as an employer with the types of laws that we're facing.
You know, next week, I'm going to have you on next week. In fact, you're stuck now because you've been on the air. But Annie, I want you to talk about next week. I want you to think about this. The liability factor. My partner Rusty Nails on the Big Biz Show brought this up yesterday. What about if you stub your toe at home while you are working for your employer? We got to talk about that, because I think that's a very real thing. Annie, thank you so much. Annie Ellis, employment lawyer, and she's now our employment lawyer here on News Radio 600 KOGO. You can find more about her at AnnieEllisLaw.com, or I'll put it up at our website, KOGO.com, keyword selling. Coming up, Chris Goldsmith with Belly Up Live, president of Belly Up Entertainment. We're looking for something to do this weekend? One thing you can do is turn on KUSI at 11 a.m. this morning and watch myself, Rusty Nails, and Little Tommy on the air. Also, Chris Goldsmith's going to tell you about some virtual concerts. Coming up, San Diego Business Weekend on the air, News Radio 600 KOGO.